And this will be posted on Narnon, Ontario in the podcast section for you to watch at a later date. So to avoid any background noise, please remember to mute your microphones unless you're sharing or speaking. Let's have a moment of silence now for the friends and family members who have not yet found the rooms of Narnon, followed by the Serenity Prayer. And I will pop that on the screen. We'll take that moment now, please. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, let's jump in with a few readings. We won't do our usual list, but I do like to do a few. Can I have a volunteer to read the newcomer's welcome?
I can do that, Lisa. It's Mark.
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
All right. Newcomers, welcome. The Naranon Family Group is primarily for you who know or have known a feeling of desperation concerning the addiction problem of someone very near to you. We have traveled that unhappy road too and found the answer with serenity and peace of mind. When you come into the family group, you are no longer alone, but among true friends who understand your problem as few others could. We will respect your confidence and anonymity, as we know you will respect ours. We hope to give you the assurance that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness is too great to be overcome. Our program, which is not a religious one, but a spiritual way of life, is based on the 12 steps of Narnon. We have found that the working of these steps will bring the solution to practically any problem. We urge you to take this program and its 12 steps seriously. It has been as helpful to us as the Narcotics Anonymous program is to the addict. We only ask for the wisdom and courage to see ourselves as we really are, to do something about ourselves with the help of a higher power as we understand this, and for the grace to release our addicts with love and cease trying to change them. Keep an open mind and attend as many meetings as possible. Feel free to share during you won't be sharing during this meeting. You may ask questions after the meeting. You will soon make new friends and will feel very much a part of the group. With the understanding that addiction is a disease and the realization that we are powerless over it, as well as over other people's lives, we are ready to do something useful and constructive with our own. Then and only then can we be of any help to others. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. And now can I have a volunteer read the 12 steps?
I can do that.
This is Betty.
Okay, Lisa, why don't you do the 12 steps and Betty, you can do the 12 traditions.
The 12 steps of Naranon family groups. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over the addict, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Thanks for letting me read.
Thank you, Lisa. Betty?
The 12 traditions of Naranon family groups. Our group experience suggests that the unity of the Naranon family groups depends upon our adherence to these traditions. Number 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal progress for the greatest number depend on unity. 2, For our group purposes, there is but one authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the relatives of addicts, when gathered for mutual aid, may call themselves an Nar-Anon family group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. The only requirement for membership is that there be a problem of addiction in a relative or friend. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other Nar-Anon family groups or NA as a whole. 5, each Nar-Anon family group has but one purpose, to help families of addicts. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of Nar-Anon, by encouraging and understanding our addicted relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of addicts. 6, our family groups ought never to endorse, finance, or lend our name to any outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary spiritual aim. But although a separate entity, we should always cooperate with Narcotics Anonymous. 7, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Nar-Anon 12th step work should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, our groups as such ought never to be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, the Nar-Anon family groups have no opinion on outside issues, hence our name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, films, internet, and other forms of mass media. We need guard with special care the anonymity of all NA members. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles above personalities. Thank you for letting me serve.
Thank you. And our last reading will be today's sesh reading. Is there a volunteer that can read that, please? Bonnie?
I can, yeah.
Okay. I'll just pop it on the screen.
Oh, good.
I think.
Okay.
Yep, that's the one. All right, go ahead.
May 29th, Nar-Anon Daily Sesh Reading. Self-pity. Self-pity is defined as the self-indulgent belief that your life is harder and sadder than everyone else's. I spent many of my early Nar-Anon meetings overcome with self-pity. I was married to an addict. In my mind, my life was more difficult than anyone else's was, and I was miserable. The addict was wasting our money on drugs and had even been arrested. I was living with huge problems and I had no answers. I had a right to feel hurt and angry. At a meeting, I heard a member share that she was grateful to be married to an addict. From an earlier sharing, I knew her life was not easy and her situation was not much different from my own. So I thought I must have misunderstood her. She explained that if she were not married to an addict, she would never have considered coming to Nar-Anon. Without the 12 steps, she would still think the way she always had. No one would have suggested that she did not need to solve every problem. She would not have learned to turn to her higher power to handle those things she could not. Sorry. I lost my place.
Can you see my cursor moving here?
There we go. Yes.
Okay.
She would not have learned about gratitude. Gratitude helped her change her perspective. With gratitude, she could look for the good things in her life and take the focus off the bad things. She understood she could love herself and be happy even if she did not have the perfect life. I had not misunderstood. I was engaged in self-pity and it was self-indulgent. It was time to change my attitude to gratitude. Thought for today, if I see myself clearly and honestly in relation to my present circumstances, I will see that I can still choose to be happy and grateful and not have to become the victim of self-pity. And the quote by Helen Keller, self-pity is our worst enemy, and if we yield to it, we can never do anything good in the world.
Thank you very much, everybody. And okay, seventh tradition, we have no dues or fees, as you know, but we do have costs from the Zoom platform and other regional costs. You can make donations to our Ontario Speaks to support the Naranon program and its services. We are fully self-supporting through our own contributions. So you can either e-transfer or PayPal your contribution to Helping Hand and Heart 22@gmail.com. And I'll put that in the chat once the meeting gets going. So tonight, as you know, is our open speaker meeting. We don't typically go around the room and have everybody share, but if there is time at the end, we certainly will. We also like to have an opportunity to share one thing that we've done good for ourselves through the week. So maybe we'll have time for that. And Bonnie is going to keep the room open afterwards for some informal chat if anybody would like to do that. So, and our next Ontario Speaks meeting will be July 31st, so it's only 2 months. I already do have another Narcotics Anonymous speaker, so I'll be looking for a Naranon speaker. So if anybody would like to share their experience, strength, and hope, reach out and we'll get you on the agenda for that. Okay, let's get started. The way that we'll do this is we'll start with Pam from Naranon and then wrap up with Chad. So Pam, I'll turn it over to you. You'll have about 25 minutes each. Well, let's say 22. Would you like me to put the timer on? Pam?
I think that would, for me, it would probably make me more nervous, but
Okay.
it might be a good idea just as a reminder to me. So sure, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. All right. You go right ahead. No need to be nervous. You're amongst family here.
Right. Okay, my name is Pam, and I am a grateful member of this Naranon family group, and I actually also attend one on Sunday evenings as well. And I see a lot of people in here that also go to the Sunday meeting. So I see a lot of familiar faces, which I appreciate and am thankful to see so many of you in here. As far as my own experience and my history, and why I came to Naranon. It all started, no, I'll just cut to the chase. My counselor that I was seeing on a regular basis recommended that I consider a Naranon meeting. And so on a Sunday evening in November of 2022, I attended my first meeting. And at that meeting, I felt very unsure because I just thought, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting and they're going to help me figure out what's best for my addicted loved one, which is my daughter, and I'll get to her in a minute. But that's not what they were talking about. They were talking about how people in Naranon, that what we have for this group is help for us, not the addicted loved one, the ALO. The other thing in that first meeting, way back when, they talked about the 3 C's, and I still bring that up on a regular basis as far as slogans. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it, and I can't control it. And the control issue is the one thing that I've always had issues with, because as a mother, and I will also say that I am a nurse. So as a nurse, I'm caring, and as a mother, I am caring for my children, and I try to make sure that my flock gets what they need. And so I was still sometimes control what is happening in her life. But I'm working on that. I'm a whole lot better than I was back in 2022 as far as what's going on with my daughter. So, a little about her. She is now 33 years old, and when she graduated from high school, she lived with me for a while, has had various jobs in um, retail, and then after a bit of time, moved about an hour away from where I live to another city. And it was when she was in that city that she met people that were addicts. And she had an apartment that I helped her lease so she could have her own place. So, first mark against Pam was helping her get an apartment. And by the time she left that apartment, a couple years later, I think they probably condemned that apartment because it was so messed up in there. But one of the things that really, she never admitted to being an addict for the first year or so. I would question her, and she would say, "Oh, no, no, not me, not me. The people that are staying here, they're using, but I don't use." I said, "Oh, really? You can be there with them and not use." And that should have been a red flag, but being naive like I was like, "Oh, okay. No, Katie doesn't use. I said her name. Sorry." Anyway, after a bit, um, she called me one day and said, "I need you to come here because there's been a situation and I need you here." Wouldn't tell me what the situation was, but that they recommended you come. So I drove an hour up there, and as I pulled in, they were coming out of her apartment with a body bag because the person that had been living with her had overdosed, and she's the one that found him. So she tried to revive him. She tried what she could to help him, and ended up, she talked to a couple of the police officers who said, call your mom, get her here to help you. So that's what I did, and brought her back to my place. She was here for a little bit. We already had been trying to come up with a situation to get her to rehab. 3 times attempted rehab before she finally stayed for 30 days. Then when she got back out of rehab, inpatient rehab, she needed outpatient therapy, and she went to outpatient therapy here in the city I live in, and she was living with me again. While she was going to these intensive outpatient therapy sessions, she met a guy, and they ended up hitting it off. And long story short, they started dating, and then he they got married, and they got married 2 years ago in September of this year. Anyway, recently, last week, they decided they're separating. And so my daughter has moved back in with me again. This is like the third or fourth time she's moved back in with me, with the stipulation that these are temporary, that she can't stay here, but she has no place to go. So she would be homeless if I, and I do have a house that's big enough for her to live in. That's not the problem, but anyway. So during these years of me attending Narana meetings, I also have found my spiritual awareness with the Serenity Prayer. I find that this particular prayer I say a lot. I've said it a lot today as I've been preparing for this. I also, when my daughter was getting married, and I ended up being the one to pay for a lot of her wedding costs. I said the Serenity Prayer a lot then because I had a feeling, even back then, that this was going to be a marriage of struggles, and it has been, but that's a whole nother story. Why do I keep coming back? Because in these last few years, I have gotten a sponsor. I have gone through the 12 steps within the Naranan 36 book. I find that my sponsor has certainly helped me through a lot of my struggles with control and other things that have gone on in my life because of my addicted loved one. I I I am divorced, and my ex-husband and I are now friends, living in two different cities. He still calls to check and see how our daughter is doing, but his interactions with her are limited as compared to mine. I still am an important person in her life as far as her being able to survive with what she's got going on. She is working, but it certainly won't pay for her to live on her own. So that's the other thing we got to work out and figure out with her. The important parts of the program that have helped me on my journey, probably one of the biggest is knowing that I'm not alone, that I've got all of you to help me and support me, and you have me as well. I am involved with I'm also a sponsor, but I'm also involved with doing service work within Naranan by doing the topic lead and helping out with scheduling and those types of things in this group, as well as the Sunday evening group. So I feel that I'm certainly trying to contribute to Naranan, because without it, I know my life would be a lot different if I didn't have it in my life. As far as my choices, I am still seeing a counselor. I am also still obviously attending these meetings. I now have a sponsoree that I'm working with and going through with her situation. And the thing is even though you think, oh, well, because, you're like everybody else, but no, we all have our own situations. We all have our own life circumstances that we're living, but it's the people in this room that certainly are there and understand, because you also have been there. One book that was recommended to me by my counselor before I even started Naranon was a book by Melody Beattie called Codependent No More. I know it's not conference approved literature, but there are quotes in the SESH book from Melody Beattie, and that book was something that helped me to get started with my recovery, and it also helped me to know Naranon is where I needed to be. So I am here, and I have been coming to these meetings now, like I said, since 2022. And I really do find that it works if you work it. So I'm working it. And with that, I will tell you what I did good for myself this week. I have had a busy week. I'm going to physical therapy right now, and also the weather's been nice, so I bought some plants and planted them in my flower beds, and I just have kept really busy doing stuff for me and trying to stay in my own lane. And with that, I will pass on to you, Chad.
Okay, thank you very much, Pam.
Thank you, Pam.
Excellent. Keep
Thank you,
coming
Pam.
back.
Thank you,
Keep
Pam.
coming.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Okay, Chad, we'll turn it over to you.
How's it going, guys? Thank you, Pam. That was great. I'm a grateful recovering addict, and my name is Chad. What am I addicted to? Well, just about anything that will make me feel good, I can make my life unmanageable with it. So whether that is drugs, alcohol, food, sex, anything that makes my life feel good for a minute, I will destroy my life with it. It's just what I've always done. I really struggled for a long time admitting I was a drug addict. And I remember the guy who would become my sponsor said to me one time, like, he said, well, if you're not an addict, then are you like a degenerate? And I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you're not an addict, why are you doing all these really shitty things? And I was like, that's a good point. He goes, well, at least if you're an addict, he goes, I can help you. He goes, but if you're not an addict, you can get help. He goes, because you're a degenerate. He goes, but I can't help you. Right. So I was never so happy to call myself an addict after that. Right. So for myself, I mean, I found, I didn't always come to these, like, I started coming to Narcotics Anonymous, not because I wanted to get well, but because I wanted to learn how to use drugs successfully. And that's the same reason, like, I ended up in 2 rehabs back to back, and it was this $15 book that saved my life, right? I've never known anybody that has done the steps, has a home group, is of service, has a sponsor, sponsors other people. And in the 10 years I've been in and out of the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, I've never seen people relapse if they're doing all those things, right? It's the only thing I've seen that if you read the book and you do what the book says 100%, and I don't mean leaving parts you don't like out of it. I'm saying if you do the book the way the book tells you to do it, that's the only thing I've seen work 100%. I've tried just about everything. So I know for a fact that if you do it the right way, it does work. And I find the meat and potatoes of this program are in the steps. Like, that is where the rubber meets the road and where you really find out who you are. And I've never known anybody to do the 12 steps, whatever version. There's long versions, there's short versions, but I've never known anybody to do the 12 steps and not come back different. And, no, your problems aren't all solved necessarily, but you don't do the 12 steps and come back the same ever. There's a spiritual awakening as a result, and it's very evident when you finish them, and from my own experience. So with step one, having to say that, my life is unmanageable. Well, what does unmanageability look like? Well, for me, what it looked like was, not letting anybody really know me, but making sure I knew everything about you. It was walking into a room and not being able to walk into a room without bringing a big black cloud with me. It was, not talking to somebody unless I knew I could get something from them. It was not being able to hold a job. It was not being able to have a relationship or a healthy one because I didn't know how to do anything healthy. The biggest point of unmanageability was being surrounded at gunpoint with my 1-year-old daughter in the backseat of a car. And as that was happening, still not thinking my life was unmanageable, like as my world is burning to the ground in the middle of it, not realizing that I'm sick. And, you would think that would be somebody's rock bottom, but it wasn't. And I can remember being in the jail cell waiting, and I can hear my daughter screaming in the back. And I said to the police officer, I said, if you let me out of here, I can get her to stop crying and you guys won't have to listen to her scream. And he said, if you cared about your daughter, you wouldn't be getting charged with federal drug possession. And he called me a piece of shit. And in my perspective, he wasn't wrong. Like at that point, and to kind of show you how sick I really was, as I'm sitting there listening to her scream, I'm starting to care less about the screams. I'm starting to realize I'm going to get sick. And as the fear of getting sick from the drugs I was doing made me not care about where my daughter was, what she was doing. I needed dope, and that's all I could wrap my head around. Right. I got out on bail and it was only 20 minutes and I was high again, because it's just this insanity cycle that I was in. I could not, like I said, I couldn't call myself an addict. I could not see where my life was unmanageable right in the middle of it. It was horrible, and, you start wondering, you're the common denominator in every problem and you can't see that, no relationships working. I can't hold a job, my kids hate me. My ex-partners hate me, but it's not me. Like I'm good. And so that's why when it's better to hate the disease than the person, because when they're in the throes of addiction, and I will not justify because I'm a drug addict, I know what I did. I will not justify my actions, but I will say, unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance or unconditional access. So you can love that person still, but you have to be careful, right? Step 2 says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That kind of implies that I was once sane. I don't know that that's ever true, but that being said, I can trace my obsessive nature all the way back to being a kid. And I'm going to date myself here. When I was young, I used to run home from school and there would be the consumer's catalog and there'd be toys in it. And I would flip through the pages and look at these toys every day. I would look at them every day after school, and I came from a very poor household. So on Christmas Day, I might get a few of those toys, right? But I would manifest on this page every day. And then Christmas Day, I would get some of those toys and then I would just push them out of the way. After 10 minutes, I was bored of them and I wanted the next thing. I wanted the next thing. It was always the next thing. And I can trace that back to being a young child. Nothing ever gave me a feeling of satisfaction. Like as an addict, I've always heard, from the time I can remember, I didn't belong. Nobody understood me. You can only be in a meeting so long before you hear your own story again. And as selfish, self-centered, self-seeking drug addicts, we believe that nobody could possibly understand the depths of our minds or our hearts. And we're so unique and we're so special. Yet I walk into a room with 20 or 30 people who think exactly like me. Right. So there's got to be some merit in that. If drugs were the problem, they would do the same thing to everybody. Right. My sister did a line of cocaine with me when I was 17. She went to work Monday and I went to rehab at 40. Right. We're not the same. It just doesn't, you know what I mean? We're not all wired. Not everybody that does drugs is an addict. Right. And, when you finally get to a point where you can admit that you're an addict, I find it puts a lot of other things into perspective. Like nobody chooses to destroy their family. Nobody chooses to be the first man to break their daughter's heart like I was. I robbed my son of being being able to see what how a real man functions in any kind of discomfort, and it's very evident in the way they live today, right? Like I only have a relationship with my son, and my two daughters I don't have a relationship with at all. And so that's none of my success today didn't come, like it came at a price, right? And I don't think some people sometimes when they see how well I'm doing, they realize what it cost me to be here, right? I can remember as far back, back to the obsessive nature. Like I was woken up, when I was a kid, and it was my mom, and she was beat within an inch of her life by my father, and he was passed out on the couch, and she had to smuggle us out of town, right? I grew up in a household with like, where my dad was, partners with a lot of people in 1% motorcycle clubs. And I'm not here to tell you that all motorcycle clubs are bad, but I'm here to tell you that they're not all good either. And the ones my father was associated with were not good ones, right? And, so when the partying was going on around us and nobody was paying attention to the kids, and I was stealing drinks off the table from a very young age. And, I would sleep in front of my little sister's door because I didn't want somebody to go in there. Right. And if they did, again, back to my obsessive nature, I thought I could control the outcome. Right. And I used to sleep in front of her door. And what that did was put me at risk. And a man trying to get into her room got a hold of me when I was 4 and sexually assaulted me. Right. And that changed the whole trajectory of my life. Right. That was where things changed. And there's a line in the basic text, and it says, secrets grow in the dark and die in the light of exposure. Right. And it was a lot easier for me to keep that secret for 2 reasons. One, at the time, and keep in mind and where my heart is when I say this, times were very different. So I did not want anybody to ever think I was gay. And 2, whenever a pedophile is caught, the first thing they say is, it happened to me. And I never wanted somebody to ever think I could do that to a child. Right. And so it was a lot easier for me to keep those secrets because I was already struggling with identity as it was. The last thing I want anybody to think is I was something I wasn't. And when you're a kid, you don't even know anyway. So, with that, a lot of things come into play. Like I'm already drinking to pass out points. I'm only a child. Punishments in my house were very cruel and unusual. Like I can remember getting grounded when I was 11 years old, and I got put in my room in the winter and I got out in the spring. And the only thing I was allowed to do while I was in that room was go to school, come home, and they gave me a radio. Now it's funny because when you go to jail, you can be sitting there with murderers or arsonists or bank robbers. And what do they do to punish you? They put you by yourself, right? They put you in solitary. So me being in that room for all those hours, I became like a really bad overthinker because I was in my head so often and for so long, right? But it was, having that radio, I learned while I was in there that I had a voice and I was able to sing, right? So once I learned that to me was like, I got out of my room finally in the spring. And I come out, and my mom had a TV and she was watching, again, I'm going to date myself, Much Music. Remember that? And so I come out and I seen a video, and it was Motley Crue. And the singer from Motley Crue was standing in a stadium, and he was singing to this beautiful girl, and she just loved it. And he did this to the crowd, and 20, 30,000 people did that back to him. And I was like, I want that. I want what that man has. I want the girls to want me and the guys to want to be me. And that's what I wanted because I had no other validation in my home. Like I was a straight A student my whole life. I was in gifted classes. And then 2 years in a row with my mother's suicide attempts, I failed grade 7, and nobody asked any questions, and the type of people that we hung out with, nobody called Children's Aid or anything. And when the Children's Aid did show up, I was taught to hide my mother's drugs. Right. And whatever said in the house stays in the house. And if you didn't follow that rule, you learned real quick why you should have. Right. So, I mean, in step 3 says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Right. For me, that's really easy. I'm Christian, but I mean, for other people new in a program, whatever that looks like to you, like if that is, your higher power, like the creator, Vishnu, Ganesh, Buddha, like whatever that is, find it and make that yours, because you need something there that's loving, caring, and greater than yourself. Right. And a lot of people say, well, it can be a doorknob. Well, if you don't think a doorknob is loving, caring, and greater than yourself, then you should probably talk to your sponsor, because you have some other issues. Right. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And that was where I had to look deep. And that was where I had to realize what I am. Right. I'm an abuser. I'm a liar. I'm a manipulator. I'm an oppressor. I'm a shitty father, a shitty partner. I'm a shitty friend. Like I'm all these things, and when I wrote it down, I remember my sponsor saying to me, you're supposed to write some good stuff too. Right. It's a fearless moral inventory. And I had forgotten that I was anything good. But then I started having to dig deeper, and it was like I had a sense of loyalty at one point. There was a time where if I was out on the street and I had your back, I had your back. Right. And there was no question about that. There was, if I loved you hard, even if it was unhealthy, and there was a lot of things that I had to really dig deep to find. Right. And, even today, it's still hard to find the things that I feel I'm really great at. Except today I can say confidently and not arrogantly that I'm a really good man, and I work really hard to be a really good man. Right. And I'm okay saying that today. And even though it is a little difficult, right. At 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Like I had to sit in front of my sponsor and say all those horrible, horrible things out loud, all those rotten things that I feel I am, and he was the one who put me in check as far as the good things too. And yeah, it's really hard to say those things out loud, but once you say them out loud, it gives them life. And the reason I think it's so hard to say those things sometimes is because once you admit that something is wrong, or that, something needs to change, then change has to happen. And we're not always ready to change. Like if we could get clean by ourselves, we would have just done it. Right. And it's just that simple. And so a lot of times, like I said, I went to 2 rehabs back to back, and I didn't go to rehab to get well. I went to rehab to learn how to do drugs successfully. I kept thinking if I found this cool little cocktail or this cool little way to do it, it wouldn't end different. But every time, from the minute I did a shot or a drink to the minute I had a needle in my neck or I was homeless, the only thing that ever changed was how long it took me to get from point A to point B. And it was shorter every time. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all those defects of character. The defects of character, the liar, the manipulation, the cheater, the thief, all those things, being able to humble myself enough to get on my knees and ask my higher power, and just ask him to rid me of those. And do that repeatedly, do that daily, just keep in check exactly who I am, because without any kind of program or without a higher power, with or without drugs, I'm going to revert to a lot of these behaviors, right? They're so ingrained in me for so many years. They don't just disappear because you found recovery, right? Step 7, we ask them to remove our shortcomings, and our shortcomings are the things we have, the things behind what become longcomings, right? The reasons why we do things, the reasons why we act out. We all know anger is a secondary emotion. What are we angry about? And I can guarantee you 90% of the time, it's because something didn't go your way. No matter how you look at it, you're angry because it didn't go your way, the way you wanted it to, the way you expected it to. It will always, that's where your anger is always going to end up rooted. And once you realize the things that are making you angry, you learn how to stop those sometimes before they happen, or at least if you break character, which is very easy to do still in recovery, and I do it all the time, at least being able to acknowledge where you went wrong, right? Step 8, we made a list of persons we harmed and became willing to make amends. And we only had to be willing at this point. It was not easy because I felt some people that I had to apologize to wrong me too. I always lived by a code that I never gave anything to anybody that didn't have it coming. That's not true, by the way. But I used to really believe in my head that it was, right? And, I had to say sorry to some people who I thought wronged me, but I still had to do it, and I had to make time with these people, which means my kids and my baby mothers and all these people that I did harm to, providing it didn't hurt me or myself. Right. And step 9, made direct amends to people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure myself or others. So, I can remember my youngest daughter's mother, giving me the greatest gift. She didn't want anything I had, and a lot of people didn't want to hear my apologies, because you can only say sorry so many times, and nobody's going to believe you, even when you're serious. And this time I was serious, because I'd really taken my recovery serious, right? And I asked her for time, and she said, "You've got nothing I want, but I'll tell you what you can do." She goes, "I know you're not the same person anymore. I can see you in your recovery." She said, "But when our daughter decides she wants to see you again, be the man that you're supposed to be." Right. And that was the greatest gift she ever could have given me, because she knows that I got it in me to do it. And she's willing to give me that shot if my daughter is willing to have it one day. Right. My son, I wanted this big Hallmark moment, this slow motion, "I love you, Dad," and when I apologized to him, and he just stared me blankly in the face and said, "I don't care what you're saying. I just want you to stop doing drugs." And the arrogance in me, the ego in me, wanted this moment that I didn't deserve. Like, how dare I have the arrogance to expect, anything more? Like, this young man doesn't owe me anything. I wasn't a good father. I loved my kids, but that was never enough. There's more to it than loving them. If a mother's love, like I said, if a mother's love was enough, or a father's love was enough, it'd be a lot less addiction. You know what I'm saying? Step 10, we continued to take personal inventory when we were wrong and promptly admitted it. People ask me if I do that every day, and I do. I take a moral inventory every day, because I don't want to repeat the mistakes that I make, because like I said, it's still easy for me to break character sometimes. And I will break character if I'm not careful and I'm not running a program. It's very easy for me to slip back into old behaviors. I can even go as far as to think I might be able to drink successfully, whereas, I might get away with drinking once, and then, I might very well get away with it twice. But then I guarantee you it's only a matter of time before I find my drug dealer's number at the bottom of that glass. And then it's only a matter of time before I'm in a ditch with a rig in my neck. And that's just how it's going to go. And again, it's never changed any other time I've done it. Step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for his knowledge and his will for us, and the power to carry that out. And every day, I'm not too proud to get on my knees and ask him. The moment I got clean, he was the first person I reached for. When I got on my knees, May 31st, 2021, Sunday will be 5 years clean for me, right? And May 31st, 2021, I came out, and I'd been using all night with my then wife, and we were up all days. We were up for days, actually. And she had finally fallen asleep, and I come out, and my daughter was sleeping on the couch. And I've been using all night with my daughter in the house. And and it's not my wife's daughter or my ex-wife's daughter. I had her for the weekend, and that's how I was respecting that visit, and I come out and I lean down on the couch by her feet, and I just looked up and I said, "Just tell me what to do and I will do it. I will do whatever you tell me to do." And I felt the honey wrap around my heart, and I started laughing and crying hysterically. And I knew at that moment that I could never do another drug again, because I'm telling you, and I mean this with everything in me, if I go back out, I'm not coming back. I don't have it in me to do this again, right? It's a lot easier to stay clean than to get clean. And I promise you that, right? And I will not, I just won't. The cemetery is full of people who thought they had another time in them. Since I've been in recovery, I've known over 60 people to die, and not just people that I've said hi to, people I've had these conversations with, right? And when I came in, a gentleman said to me, "Buy a suit, because you're going to go to a lot of funerals and a lot of medallions." And he was right. And I've gone to many of both. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles into all our affairs. This is where I get to do things like this. This is where I get to carry the message for people who think there's no way out. This is where I can prove that it can be done. And this is where I can show people that there's really something really, really beautiful at the end of all this. And I can promise them that, right? All they got to do is show up for themselves, come here, do the things. There is nothing for you out there. There's nothing out there. And if you come to NA and you hate it, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to stay clean for an hour and pray a couple times. That's it. You can go out there and do all the research you want, But I'm telling you, I lost 2 nephews 3 years ago to the disease. I've lost sponsees. I've lost people that left my house and said they were just going home to eat food and went home and used, and they're dead. You know, it's not, if you can't see that it's life or death out there, then you need to pray to your higher power for better eyes or glasses, because you're blind, right? It's an attack out there. This world is dying, and there's more of us coming. There's so many more of us coming, because addiction isn't going anywhere. And we need people to be, when I walked into an NA meeting the first time, and a man walked up to me and said, "I've been waiting for you." And I didn't know what that meant. What did that mean? And he said, "We always pray for the still suffering addict to find their way to the rooms." And he said, "And you're here finally. I get to meet you." When I've I've been in and out of those rooms for 10 years. It took me 10 years to get 5 because I'm a fast learner, right? But, when I see somebody walk in, I do the exact same thing. I walk up and I make sure they know they're home. And I don't like everybody in the rooms. I don't, but I'm not going to. And I don't have to, but I'll tell you this. I remember an addict saying to me one time, he said, "You don't have to love me, just don't let me die." And I was like, deal. And that's the promise we make in step 12. And my sponsor said to me, you don't get to hoard your recovery. If you had the cure for cancer in your pocket, you don't get to not share that. You know how to stay clean now. And if you don't do your job, I cannot do mine. I'm going to wrap this up because I see the time, but my life today is very fruitful. It's very plentiful. I work with youth today. And if you'd have told me 5 years ago that I would have a job working with special needs kids, addicted kids, homeless kids, I would have said I thought I was the one on drugs, right? There was no way in the world that I would have believed that I would be here today. I drive my own car to work every day, something I never thought. I've got my license back after 10 years. They did a short film on my life, that garnered 26 laurels when most movies get 6. I released a book in July last year, on Amazon, and all these things I wouldn't have without the gift of recovery, and I'm not saying these things as a flex, like, look how great I'm doing. I'm saying it can be done, and I'm saying, like, without recovery, I wouldn't have any of this stuff. My hierarchy goes my higher power, my recovery, and then everything else, because without those 2 things, I have nothing, and I promise you, again, I'll say it, there's something really beautiful at the end of all this. You just got to show up for it. I'm a grateful recovering addict named Chad. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Wow.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you,
Thank
Chad.
you, Chad.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
Chad.
Inspiring story. Thank you, Chad.
Yes, very powerful.
Wow. Thank you, Chad.